Hi Capricorn. Welcome to your Saturn transit video for the transition from Sagittarius into your sign, Capricorn. I am drinking a mimosa. Fear not, this is my first one. By the time I get to the Taurus reading, it's gonna be a hot mess. But right now, you're getting the best of me. So I just wanted to make these quick videos because for me personally, as a Gemini, the Saturn transit in Sagittarius was, ooh, girl, it was a lot. And I did a video for the Geminis, but then I had requests to do videos for the other signs, and I thought that would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about the Saturnic houses. I tend to only focus on the one that I'm going through at the time. So I think this is a really great one to do as well because Saturn's coming home to roost in Capricorn in your sign. So let's talk a little bit about it. Saturn, as you know, as you may or may not know, is your ruling planet. So it has now come back after about 29 years of bouncing around the other signs to hang out in your first house for the better part of the next 3 years. So normally I would say that this would be a challenging transit because Saturn is a planet that brings delays. It does bring structure. It does bring discipline, and those are great things. But the way in which it teaches you how to be more structured and disciplined is by creating delays and challenges that you then have to problem solve around. So even though I think the rewards of Saturn's like the heavy hitter of the planets. I would say Saturn and Pluto, they're like the heavy hitters. They put you through work. You know, it's just like it's not light and cheery work. It's not a Venus transit, you know, like it's not a Jupiter transit. It's work. So being in your first house, which is the house of you, what it means to be you, your sense of self-esteem, your physical self, you know, just the first house is basically your foundation. I would normally say that a Saturn transit in your first house would be really challenging, but for y'all, this energy should be right at home for you. You're Capricorns. Like this is what you do best, you know? You do structure well. You handle challenges well. You are dogged. You are stubborn. You don't give up. You are a sign of perseverance. You are a sign of structure and discipline, you know? So it will, of course, vary, you know, depending on your own unique chart. You know, if you have a lot of Capricorn in your chart, I think this could be a really good transit for you. You know, depending on what the rest of your chart looks like, it might be a little bit more challenging. But for the most part, you know, you should have just gone through with the Saturn transit in your 12th house a time of endings, of letting go of things, structures, perspectives, behaviors that maybe weren't good for you. And I think Saturn in the 12th house can be exhausting. You know, it really is kind of like, I think of the Lord of the Rings, if you've ever seen that, where it's just like, by the time you get to the third movie, it's just like a fucking slog. Like everybody's fighting everybody. Like everyone's just trying to save every ounce of the realm that they can. Like that's how I think of the Saturn transit in the 12th house. It is a time for you to put things to rest. So depending on the work that you did in that transit, this transit can be a really, really great time for you. You know, ideally in that 12th house transit, you let things go. You were able to abandon the structures, the perspectives, the relationships, whatever it is that wasn't working for you. And now in your first house, Saturn can help you rebuild structures. So kind of think of this as almost like a rebirth. To have Saturn in Capricorn in your first house can be a great new start for you. And it's really a mature start, you know? This is a time for you to really take ownership and responsibility for the things that you're doing and to handle them in a disciplined, structured way. I think this could be a really exciting time for Capricorns, particularly because Pluto's hanging out in your sign and has been there since, I want to say, 2008. These two planets in harmony with one another in your first house can create really, really wonderful things for you. So what is going to be the emphasis for y'all moving forward? It's really going to be self-care, taking care of yourself on a real level, on like a daily basis. What are you doing every day? You know, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you, Capricorns talk a lot about financial value, but you have to realize too that Capricorn is not just a sign of financial value, it's a sign of emotional and spiritual value. So really taking a step back and asking yourself, how am I uplifting and affirming my value? And how am I perhaps undermining and denigrating it by the things that I do on a daily basis? I think that's going to be a really big thing for y'all. Self-esteem. This is a time where I think you're going to go really deeply within. And that is a good thing to do. You do want to kind of go inside for this transit. Doesn't mean cut yourself off from people, but there is a lot of internal work that you're going to need to do. And self-auditing. What is your current self-auditing process like? Do you have one? Do you journal? Do you go to therapy? Do you process with friends? How do you do that? If you're not currently doing that, I highly, highly recommend that you take up some kind of practice that allows you to do that. Because as I said, this is the house of you. This is your core sense of self-worth is the first house. So you really want to harness that potential and make use of this transit. I don't want to say Capricorns in general can sometimes take things a little too seriously. You aren't as bad as some of the other earth signs, Taurus, but you do have a tendency as an earth sign to maybe be a little too serious. The upside, of course, is that you can be high achievers. You can be kind of like the leaders of the pack. But sometimes it borders on rigidity or curmudgeonliness. Is curmudgeonliness a word? You know what I'm saying. I would say, yes, tune into that power, tune into that rigidity, but don't let it consume you. Don't let it run your life right now, which can be a little bit tempting when Saturn is hanging out in your first house. You got to kind of like hang a little bit loose, which is maybe a little bit contradictory to say for a Saturn transit. But my point is that you don't want to be too rigid. That is the downside to Saturn, is that sometimes it can make you too rigid. And this is a time where, while structure is important and discipline is important, more importantly is for you to figure out who you really are. And you don't want to be too hard and I'm trying to think of a different word to use besides rigid. You want to give yourself a little bit of leeway to explore that. But this isn't the time in your life where you're going to explore that through like doing ayahuasca in Peru. Like, this is not the time for y'all to be doing that. This is to think of things in a more, like I said, adult structured way. So maybe not that reckless adventurousness that people like me, Geminis, that we like to learn our lessons through, but something more disciplined. And again, I think that's why it's important for y'all to have a good self-auditing method in place for the next 3 years. So if you're not doing anything right now, I highly recommend that you figure out what that is. Again, for some people it might be therapy, for some people it might be journaling, writing. It could be expression through another art form. Capricorns are very secretly creative. I think it's something that people overlook that in y'all because they do think of you as more like pragmatic and business oriented, but you are actually an incredibly, incredibly creative sign. And you have the ability to stick to something through to the end of fruition. So I think y'all, that's sort of like your untapped hidden power, or perhaps not untapped, but unacknowledged. You don't get a lot of credit for it as a sign. So, maybe your self-auditing is a little bit more creative. It's not as Saturnic as sitting down and writing things out or processing things with another person. Like maybe it's dance, maybe it's painting, whatever it is for you. Get that in place early, get it in place now, and really use that as a way to get to know yourself a little bit better in these next few years. You really want to come by the end of 2020, you need to have more than you've ever had in your life, a solid foundation of self-worth and self-esteem. That's going to be really big for y'all here. You're basically being rebuilt from the inside out. That's what Saturn is doing to y'all for the next 3 years. So again, it depends on how the last 3 years went for you. Were you doing the work that Saturn was demanding of you? Were you making amends with your past and letting things go where they needed to be let go? Or were you clinging to things against your better judgment and against your self-care and your self-value? Because if you're still doing that going into 2018, this is going to be a jolting transit for you. value, self-value, self-esteem. These are the things that you need to focus on, and anything that doesn't lift that up, that doesn't reaffirm that for you, you need to let it go, because it's really going to have a bearing on your sense of self while Saturn is transiting your first house. I think for some people at the beginning of this transit, you might feel a little jolted, because again, it is really dependent on the inner work you've been doing, especially if you've been sort of outside oriented, which Capricorns can do, right? Like, y'all can climb ladders. There's no doubt about that. You know, you are I think you are often very externally focused on success, on power, on prestige. The next 3 years is going to be a bit of a reorientation on the internal. Don't shy away from that. I'm not saying like go into the woods and become a hermit. I mean, if you want to, you know, but keep that in check. Honor that. Honor your inner work, honor your inner world. And I think self-care is also really important during this time, because even though I do think for y'all, this transit won't be as challenging as it might be for other signs, because as I said, Saturn is really coming home to roost in your sign. It doesn't mean that Saturn's energies aren't going to be draining on you. Saturn is a very draining energy, let me tell you, girl, because it was just opposing my first house, not in my first house, but opposing my first house for the last 3 years. And I was so low energy, probably the lowest energy I've ever been. Could be because I'm an old fart. I don't know. So self-care is going to be really important, because you're going to need the downtime. You're going to need the energy. You're going to need the health. You're going to need all of that during this time, especially if you are going to be keeping yourself externally focused, as Capricorns tend to do, because you're still going to have to do this internal work. And if this internal work is new for you, then you really need to be taking very good care of yourself, because I don't think you're ready. You know, self-reflection is extremely exhausting. It's a really tiring process. Making internal changes is really exhausting. So, you know, be aware of that and just keep an eye on it. Again, I think for y'all, self-audit, that is the message that's the download I'm getting for y'all, is like, check in on yourself, you know? Make sure that things are, if you're feeling overwhelmed or something, then you need to take a step back and do something good for you. I'm not saying do this. I'm a Gemini. This is what I would do because I'm reckless and dumb. But, you know, take a yoga class, whatever it is, girl, cook a healthy meal, get some rest, drink your water, like exfoliate, do the whole thing. Those things that make you feel good about yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually, this is the time for you to really delve into that. So maybe as you're thinking about going into this new year, I'm gonna do a quick little shuffle for y'all. Maybe as you're thinking about going into this new year, maybe take, you know, if you're not out partying tomorrow night, I will not be actually. I don't usually go out on New Year's Eve, don't tell anyone. It's just expensive and hectic and overwhelming, and no judgment. If y'all want to party in the new year, I support that, but I personally like to bring in the new year in a sober headspace. Sober-ish headspace, just really reflecting on the year and thinking about my intentions for the coming year. To me, that feels really good. So if you're not doing that tomorrow night, because you're going out and you're going to have a good time, again, no shade, do the do, then maybe the day after, maybe New Year's Day, or if you're too hungover that day, the 2nd, or if you have work that day, then take this upcoming Saturday to do this work and really write it out, type it out. You know, however you like to do it, really look at how you treat yourself on a daily basis and start instating small habits that will make you feel better about yourself. Meditation, exercise, eating well, drinking water. I mean, as eye-rolling as these things sound, ooh, that one wanted to come out. Girl, we'll get into it. I'm just gonna do a quick pull for y'all, nothing too big, just a couple cards. See, this makes perfect sense. We're going to see how the rest of the cards fall out. The Wheel of Fortune, Saturn, I mean, like, this is it. Saturn's made it all the way around, and here we are back at 1. How this wheel is going to turn is completely dependent on you and how you handle these next 3 years and how you treat yourself and whether or not you're willing to go in and do that work. The Wheel of Fortune is in many ways, I almost said a throwaway card, which I should never say, and don't tell any tarot reader I just said that. But it's a card that is highly, highly, highly dependent on the explicate. Highly, highly, highly dependent on the person getting the reading. The Wheel of Fortune is basically like, this thing is going to turn. But if it turns this way or it turns this way, that's all on you. But we'll pull a few more cards. So yeah, I mean, really take the time this week or weekend or whenever to figure out what your intentions are, not just for 2018, but the next few years, you know, break it down. And y'all love that shit. You know, like I'm really bad with setting goals and writing them down. I hate that stuff. Again, Gemini, it just feels really constricting to me. But for y'all, like most of y'all love doing that stuff. Like this should be, you know, lists and things. Like y'all love that, so do it. You know? My point being, be deliberate about it. Don't just phone in the next few years. I mean it, y'all. You know, I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, right? But but I am big on Saturn transit resolutions. Or I should say intention setting. I like that better. All right, Capricorn, Saturn moving into the first house. What guidance do you want to give us? You better give it quick because Mama's running out of daylight and she has 3 videos to film. Okay. Ooh, okay. Got the 8 of Cups. I'll do one more. I hope Myra's watching this. Myra, are you watching this? Myra is a Capricorn in my life who requested this video. And it kind of inspired me to do videos for all y'all. Ooh, what? Girl. So we have Wheel of Fortune came out, the 8 of Cups, and the, sorry, my camera went a little wonky there. So these are the 3 cards we pulled for you, Capricorn. The Wheel of Fortune, the 8 of Cups, and the Devil. This is you. This is your card in the tarot deck. I mean, like, what more perfect of a spread could you get? So as I said before, you know, I think the Wheel of Fortune is a symbol of, like, you are starting this new cycle. Now that Saturn is coming to roost in Capricorn. You're starting this new cycle. Where it goes is going to be highly dependent on you. You know, there's so many ways that you can interpret the Devil card. I think for this particular reading, it's really about, you know, it's also the card of Saturn. It's card of Saturn. It's the card of your sign. There is a lot of untapped power latent in Saturn and in Capricorn as a sign. And it can be very dark. But when you bring that structure, that Saturnic structure, to the situation, to yourself, to your first house, to your sense of self, you know, this darkness doesn't have to consume you. It can actually be a beautiful propelling force into something better than what you've left behind in the 8 of Cups. This is you, this is Saturn in your 12th house, which you just left. If you look at this card, this is a card of walking away, but it's kind of a slightly forlorn card, right? Like the moon's up there, he's really sad. This person, look at all this person is leaving behind. There's riches here. But this person is leaving it behind because despite what it looks like, despite how beautiful and gold it looks to us as the observer, this wasn't it for this person. This wasn't enough for them. This wasn't fulfilling for them. And they're turning and they're walking away from it. So this is what you should have done in the last 3 years when Saturn was transiting your 12th house. So I think in this layout, Capricorn, what these cards are really saying to you is, you know, if you haven't already, but you should have already, because Saturn was in your 12th house, so I'm confident that you already did, walk away from these things that no matter how good they look, and y'all can be seduced, Y'all are a sign that likes to be seduced, both by money and by sex. Like, y'all are into it, right? This is a card saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to be seduced this time. I don't care how sexy, flashy gold this looks. This isn't working for me, and I am more than willing and ready to walk away from it. Which you probably did over the last 3 years, 2.5 years. You should have been leaving a lot of things behind, Capricorn. That could be anything. That could be relationships, jobs, outdated modes of thinking that no longer serve you. This should have been you at the end of December. This is you. Bye. See you later. This is basically your present card. Moving into the future, how is Saturn going to turn this wheel? That's entirely up to you. What are you going to do? Are you going to do the work? Of course you're going to do the work. You're Capricorns. How could you not do the work? You guys do the work. Like, that's what you fucking do. I love tarot. When cards come out like this, you're just like, how? Like, Capricorn going come out in the Capricorn reading. Of course. Of course it is. All right, y'all. I hope that was helpful. You know, ironically, I wanted to make this video for Capricorns, but I feel like y'all are the sign that need this reading the least. Again, Saturn is coming home to your sign. Pluto's hanging out there. That's a very, very harmonious relationship between these two planets right now. And you're in your power. This is where Capricorns are the best, when they need to be structured and disciplined, and where they need to work hard in order to grow. Like, you guys do that naturally. You know, again, I'm a Gemini. I shy away from hard work. I'm like, excuse me, actually, why don't you just do it for me? Okay, thanks. You guys are like, great. Like, let's fucking get this done. Just keep doing what you're doing, Capricorn. Just tap into your latent power. Your latent power. Use that Saturnic structure to harness it positively. Don't get easily seduced by things right now. Don't lean into that tendency that y'all have sometimes. You know, I'm not saying don't enjoy your life, but like, be really honest with yourself as to how much value is this actually giving you? Again, like, think about value and worth moving into 2018. Think about it, you know, and this is the start of a new cycle for you. How the next 30 years of your life are going to go, the next Saturn transit through all the 12 houses, is totally dependent on the work you do right now. So do the damn work. All right. We love you. We love Capricorns. Yes. I am an air sign, but you are an earth sign that I actually enjoy. Like Taurus. I hope this was helpful. Happy New Year. Do you take care of yourself? And I love you. Okay, bye.